Hello everybody. The following video is going to be about managing 3D archery targets, and it's based on experience that I have, personal experience I have in being a target chairman for a large archery club. If you're a club or an individual, you already know the cost of 3D targets. 3D targets are very, very expensive. Very expensive, and being a consumable, yeah, you take that expensive target, you put it out, and you're shooting holes in it with arrows. So you want to manage those targets for the longest life and to get the most value out of your investment. And that investment can be considerable. If you're putting together a shoot, you're talking about tens of thousands of dollars in targets. Now there's various manufacturers, and I'm not going to mention any of the manufacturers' names. When we first started, we started with one of the big names in the industry, and we started with their core group of targets. By core group of targets, these were the ones that they initially offered, and there were things like an alert deer, a walking bear, a standing bear, wild boars, mountain lions, javelinas, caribou, elks, mountain goat, big orange sheep, strutting turkey, if I didn't already say that. I'm probably forgetting a few, it doesn't matter. But that initial group that they offered is where we started. And there was, I don't know, it had to be maybe, 12, 14, 15 different animals. And that original group was some of the best targets I think they ever made. They were all durable, they all looked good. And they sort of, in the early days, they sort of became the standard. Now, like I said, there were other manufacturers out there, and they all put together a good product. Now, we measured the life expectancy of a target, and then we came up with a formula to determine the cost per arrow. And how we did that is we'd get a brand new target in, and we would mark with a marker on the inside of the dovetail every shoot that went out at until it was completely wore out. We had records of how many shooters we had, and these targets were basically just used at those shoots. So now there's some variables, the type of shoot, the equipment, the type of archers. Obviously, if you have high-powered bows and you're in the hands of some very good archers, they're going to be pounding that small score ring harder and harder. But it gave us a general idea of the cost per arrow. And we determined with that manufacturer we were getting between 1,200 and 1,400 arrows per side of a target. We knew what the cost was. We divided it by the approximate number, and that's where we came up with the cost per arrow. And that was real helpful. That helped us determine that we were charging enough at our shoots and that we were making money, which is one of the reasons you're doing this. And it gave us an idea on how long a target would last. Now, you might say, well, the more you pay for that target, you buy such and such manufacturer, it's going to last longer. That's true, that target will last longer. However, the initial cost is more. If you do the formula, which we did it with various manufacturers, they all basically come out the same. Very close, whether you're buying an inexpensive target, inexpensive, It doesn't last as long, but the cost per arrow is about the same. Mid-price target, again, the cost per arrow figures out about the same. Very expensive targets, believe it or not, the cost per arrow in our studies came out to be about the same. Now that's not to say that certain manufacturers don't offer a better product. I mean, there's all sorts of foams out there. Some are easier to pull your arrow. Some targets maybe look a little more lifelike, whatever. But the cost per arrow is about the same, at least from what we discovered in our studies, regardless of the manufacturer. After that original new vital is shot out, after however many shoots and shooters, it still has some value. It may not be able to be used at your open to public shoots, but it still has value for your club. And what we started doing was repairing those, and we came up with a pretty inexpensive method, and it worked for us. And how we would do it is we would carve out that tore up circle of in the middle of that vital that was all beat up, cut it all out, and then we would get pieces of high density foam. We would insert that into that hollowed out cavity. Then we would wrap that with a saran wrap type material, and then poke a hole in it, and we would use spray foam insulation, the stuff you buy at the hardware store. We'd spray it in there. That foam helped it from expanding too much. It kind of kept it together. It would take about a week to 10 days for that to dry, and then after it dried, we'd take off that wrap, take a sharp knife, kind of shape it to match the rest of that vital, and then we actually had paint formulas made up that matched the original paint of the manufacturer. We would paint that. Now we had a target for our members course. It had served its life as a target for our open to the public shoots, but now we could use it on our members courses, and we found that we could repair those multiple times. Probably 3 times was about the average before the rest of the thing just started coming apart. But here we would buy the new target. We would get all those shots out of each side. Then we would repair it, and we could repair it approximately 3 times. So we were getting more value for our target. If you were so inclined, after you had a target and then you had repaired one of the vitals and ordered a new vital, you could actually use one target for multiple purposes. You could just swap out the center section, if it has one, on a target. If you wanted to use a target for open to the public shoots with good score rings, you could put out that target with that score ring in there, and then when it came time to pull that target, that course, and maybe reset up something like a course for your members, you could, if you were so inclined, just bring the new vital in and pop in a repaired vital, and now you would have a target that you could leave out for your members to shoot all the time. It's just an idea. It might work for some clubs, and it might be a way of providing your members with a members course that they could shoot all the time, not just when you had a special shoot. Here's another idea that you may want to use. If you have some creative people in your club, some creative type members, as your targets start wearing out and Maybe you've got a rear section from one type of animal and a front section from another type of animal, and a head or whatever. I've seen guys combine those and come up with some really interesting novelty type targets. Kind of fun. Also, when those targets start getting to a point where they're at the end of their life, I've also seen some creative people do some kind of cool things with the color and the paint on them. Maybe make something like a piebald deer, or a pink panther out of a mountain lion, whatever. Also, there's another thing that might help you with some of your shoots, is if you were if you had you wanted to add something that everybody would remember and talk about, and you had a source of some high density foam and some, again, creative people in your group. You could make up some homemade 3D targets. I'm not saying you want a whole course of them, but sometimes you can come up with some pretty unique things that people remember and talk about. There's sources for that high density foam. Sometimes you can pick it up from different places, and I've seen all sorts of. I've seen Energizer bunnies made. I've seen full-size rhinoceroses, and everything in between. Every kind of crazy homemade target, and you put that out on the course. And care of your target, care of your investment. UV light, if it's out in the sun, is not good for any of the targets. So you want to, maybe if you can, place the target in a shady type area. If you're storing the target, you're going to store it indoors out of the weather. And we found that when you were setting up that original target, setting it up for a course, to take the extra time to make sure that the stakes that the animal sits down on, that slide down on the legs, are straight, and that animal is straight and square, meaning that those dovetails aren't pulled. Because if they're pulled, what inevitably is going to happen is your shooters are going to come along and they're going to pull their arrow, and they're not going to be as careful as a member is going to be. More than likely, they're going to be a little rougher because it's not their target, and those dovetails are going to break. Other things that cause damage and premature wear is the handling of the targets when you're transporting them out to set up and to bring them back in. You got to slow down a little bit and handle those targets with care. A lot of damage happens to things like the ears on a target, the nose, dovetails, legs. Damage that wasn't caused from shooting at them. It was damage that was caused from not slowing down and packing them away in your trailer, or packing them away in your ATV, or even if you're hand carrying them, just being a little cautious when you're handling these, and then storing them. What we found worked quite well for us was we would store those targets, most of them, on their back with the legs up in the air. We would have the rear section and the midsection attached, and then we would place the head between those legs, and that kind of protected it. We had stalls that would, each target would be placed in a stall. We tried to keep for inventory purposes, we tried to keep all of a similar animal together. And that brings me to keeping an inventory. Now, you may say, well, what's the use of doing that? That's crazy. Actually, it's not. We would do a yearly inventory where not only did we count the targets we had, but we would mark down the condition of those targets. We had the manufacturer, we had the animal type, we had whether the vital was new or in excellent shape, whether the vital had limited wear, meaning that it had 50% or more life left in it, which meant that it would last throughout the season, or if it was getting towards the end of its life cycle and it was 50% or less wear, and then we knew that that had to be, that target would have to be replaced sometime that year. So we had a list of every target that we had, so we knew the quantity, we knew the condition, we knew what we had to order in order to keep our inventory at the desired level, and we were able to track from year to year the condition and the amount of targets that we had compared to previous years. So we would know whether or not, hey, we're slowly deteriorating and we're not building our inventory, or opposite, we knew that maybe we were building our inventory up, which was our goal. So taking an inventory is a very, very good way of managing targets. And that brings me to another item. It's natural to want to buy all sorts of type of targets and animal types and exotics and the latest and greatest. But be aware that if you do that over the years, it will become harder and harder to manage that inventory. If you keep your basic core group of targets and you decide on a manufacturer that that you like, and you stick with that, and you stick with it year after year after year, maybe add the occasional oddball thing, but you stick with that, trust me on this, it's going to be much, much easier to manage your target inventory long term. So there's a few tips on like I said, it's not rocket science, and it may seem simple or unnecessary to a lot of people, but I can tell you firsthand it's worth doing. You're going to have a large amount of money tied up in those targets, and you want to get as much life as you can out of them, and you want to manage that to the best of your ability for the club that you belong to or the organization. So hopefully some of these tips help. There's a couple other things that come to mind right now is depending on how you're setting up your course, sometimes just angling a target a little bit one way or the other, or just thinking when you're setting it up can extend the life rather than putting everything broadside at 10 yards and everybody's just pounding it, So that's something to keep in mind, what angle you got the target at, the distance. I mean, of course, you can't put everything so far away that nobody will hit it, because they're not going to come back to your shooting again. So it's a fine line between walking that line where you're giving your guests a good shoot, but you're not just throwing money away on targets and letting them just, get pounded. The repaired targets might be helpful if you were running something like a traditional shoot where it was unlimited shooting for one price. That might be a way of being able to do that and not charge an arm and a leg to your guests. Some of the higher end type shoots and everything, you're going to have to go with a non-repaired target with good score rings. So I hope all this helped, at least helped a little bit, maybe got the wheels turning on how you might want to manage your own target inventory. So until next time, everybody, take care, and thanks for watching.